Hi, I'm Tim Howland from Johnson Outdoors, Minn Kota. Today we'll be doing a complete disassembly reassembly procedure for a 3 5/8 inch diameter Minn Kota motor. 3 5/8 inch diameter motors can be 5-speed, variable speed, freshwater, or saltwater. But the disassembly reassembly procedure is the same for all. We'll be using this Traxxas 55 for our 3 5/8 inch diameter motor disassembly reassembly procedure. We'll begin our motor disassembly by removing the prop nut, washer, prop, and prop drive pin. Hold the prop with one hand while using a 1/2 inch nut driver to remove the prop nut. If the drive pin is sheared, a blade screwdriver will be used to hold the armature shaft stationary while the nut is removed with a 1/2 inch open-end wrench. With the prop and drive pin removed, inspect the area behind the prop hub. If any fishing line is noted, plan on replacing the 2 prop shaft seals. As an aid to reassembly, place a short length of masking tape across the center section and the front end bell. Then use a razor knife to cut that tape right along that seam. Use a 5/16 nut driver to remove the 2 motor through bolts. A short length of PVC pipe can be used to hold the armature in place while the center section is being removed. Use the brush spreader tool to hold the brushes in place when the armature is removed from the front end belt. Examine the armature commutator for damage, discoloration, or arcing. If necessary, the comm can be cleaned and polished using a fine grade of emery cloth or sandpaper. Check the armature for continuity between the armature commutator and the armature shaft. No continuity should be noted. If continuity is found, the armature is faulty and will need to be replaced. Check the continuity of each comm section to the other comm sections on the comm. Each comm section should show continuity to all the other comm sections. If any comm section is found that does not have continuity, the armature is faulty and will need to be replaced. Remove the brush spreader tool and inspect the brushes and brush springs for any damage or wear. If the brushes are badly worn, they will need to be replaced. We can also remove the cardboard ring that will be used for reassembly. To remove the brushes, remove the brush holder from the front end bell by removing the 2 Torx T20 screws. Lift the brush plate out of the end bell. Note the position of the red and the black brush leads. Remove the worn brushes by using a small, narrow screwdriver or small diameter awl to depress the barb on the brush. The brushes can then be removed and replaced. The cardboard ring that was previously removed can then be used to hold the brushes in place in the brush plate assembly. Reinstall the brush plate and brushes back in the front end bell. Drop the 2 T20 Torx screws into position. With the brush plate back into position, install the new gasket in the front end bell. Next, we'll reinstall the armature. You'll note that using the cardboard ring, when the armature is reinstalled, the comm will push the cardboard ring ahead of it, and the armature brushes will then drop into place in contact with the comm. Check the brushes to make sure that good contact is being made. Next, we can reinstall the front end bell assembly with magnets. Examine the magnets for any damage. If the magnets are cracked or broken, the center section will need to be replaced. You'll note that there's a flat surface that comes in contact with the gasket, and at the opposite end is a beveled surface that will come in contact with an O-ring on the plain end housing. But since we've used the masking tape to mark that center section, it's a simple matter for us to just line up the edges of the tape for reassembly. This is critical because reversing this center section, if we were to install this oriented just 180 degrees out of normal position, the motor will run backwards. Hold the armature in place using, again, the PVC plastic pipe, and then lower the center section. And get ready, because the magnetic pull will be considerable when you lower that over the armature itself. Now simply line up the cut edges of the masking tape. If we'd found monofilament line when we disassembled this motor, we would be replacing the two seals in this plain end housing. The two seals are different from one another. One seal will have a stainless steel line guard like is shown here, and one will have an open cup side. To remove the seals, simply use a blade screwdriver to reach in and pry up on the seals to pry them out of place. When reinstalling the new seals, grease the seal bore, press the seal into place, the open cup seal first, and the seal with the stainless steel line guard second. Remove the old O-ring, install the new O-ring in its place. A light coat of grease could be applied to these O-rings to ease in reassembly. Before installing the plain end housing, make sure that the thrust washers are in position. On 3 5/8 inch diameter motors, we should find a steel washer first, placed up against the E-ring on the armature shaft, followed up by 1 or 2 nylotron washers. We'll then take the plain end housing, position it over the armature shaft and into position on the motor unit. Position the openings for the through bolts at the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock position relative to the motor skeg and shaft. Remove the old O-rings from the through bolts and replace them with new through bolt O-rings. Apply a small amount of grease to these two O-rings to protect them from damage when the through bolts are tightened into place. Drop the two through bolts into place. Finger tighten them a few turns to make sure that the bolts are started properly and are not cross-threaded. Use a 5/16 nut driver to tighten the two through bolts to about 35 to 40 inch-pounds. Give the armature shaft a slight turn or spin just to make sure that everything is moving freely. There should be a small amount of in-out movement here at the armature shaft. To complete the disassembly reassembly procedure, we'll reinstall the prop shaft drive pin, checking to make sure that the pin is not bent or damaged. Slip the prop back into place, making sure that it drops into position on the drive shaft and the drive pin. It's a good idea to use a small amount of never-seez or light grease on the threads of that prop nut to aid in future disassembly and removal. Tighten the prop nut into place using the 1/2 inch nut driver. We will lower the motor back into its normal position, connect it to a 12-volt power source or power supply, and test run the motor. Fully variable speeds forward and reverse. And we verified that the prop is turning in the right direction. In forward, when viewed from the rear, the prop will be turning counterclockwise. This completes the disassembly procedure for a 3 5/8 inch diameter motor lower unit.